Are you in pain because of your computer? If your neck, shoulder, wrist, or elbow is hurting, here are some tips on what to do about it, especially if you have computer wrist or mouse elbow. This is Alan Willett with another episode of the Tennis Elbow Classroom Podcast. And I'm going to cover the three biggest ergonomic factors as I see them. The big three adjustments that have benefited me tremendously over the years with all the time I've spent on my computer, which is pretty substantial. I'll leave the 7 other suggestions for you to read in my article, 10 Tips to Heal Mouse Elbow, if you want more suggestions and details beyond the ergonomic. I'm focusing on the 3 key ergonomic suggestions because these are the adjustments that you only need to make once that can deliver substantial improvements for years to come. The downside is that they have an upfront cost in money, time, and effort setting them up. We're going to cover the keyboard tray, the narrow keyboard, and the question of supports. But before we get into the specifics of these 3 things, let's first take a look at the big picture and what we're trying to optimize for first, which is sometimes called the 90-90-90 rule, meaning that ideally we want our hips to be at a 90-degree angle unless we're standing at a sit-stand desk, for example. And ideally we want our knees and elbows to be at 90-degree angles or slightly greater. A greater angle meaning closer to straight. A lesser angle means more of a bend in the joint, which is not ideal. So it's fine to have your legs at slightly more than 90 degrees if your feet are on a footrest, for example. This is the least important angle of the 3, by the way. Whereas having your hips at 90 degrees is the most important joint angle. There's little or no room for variation on that if you're sitting. So having a chair that fits well with good back support and sitting up straight is key, but no armrests. More on that later. Try really hard to break your slumping habit if you have one, because it's really hard to have good alignment in your upper body if you're not sitting properly. Your arms should hang straight down from your shoulders. This is key, whether you're sitting or standing. So your elbows are ideally right at the side of your body and not out from the side of your body or in front of you, not even an inch or 2. Obviously, your forearms and hands will be out in front of you. I'm talking about your upper arms and your shoulder angle. If you're watching the video of this rather than listening to the podcast, you can see in the image that the girl's arms are not at her sides, among other factors, like the fact that she's slouching a bit. Your elbows should be at 90 degrees or slightly more, whether sitting or standing, and this is very important in order to allow your wrists to be as straight or as close to straight as possible. And in the image you can see that her wrists and elbows, those angles are okay, but only because she's resting her forearms on the desk, which is creating a pressure restriction, which we'll talk more about later. Now that we have those basic angles down, let's talk about the specifics of the 3 things I think are the most important, which all have to do with the keyboard and mouse. Number 1 is the keyboard tray. Why is a keyboard tray so important? Can't you just have your keyboard on your desk or use the keyboard on your laptop? Probably not. Chances are, unless you're a fairly tall person, the desk surface is going to be too high. And if you raise your chair high enough, if it even goes high enough, your feet will be swinging in the breeze, which is not workable for most people. A good keyboard tray is adjustable up and down, as well as forward and back, enabling you to have your chair at the right height and angle for your hips and knees, and have your feet on the floor or a footrest, and to have your keyboard on its tray basically on or very close to your thighs and very close to your waist. That allows your arms to hang from your shoulders and remain at your sides with no reaching forward. And it enables your elbows to be at 90 degrees or a little more. It's difficult to get yourself lined up this well if your keyboard is on your desk. Although if your desk is low enough or your chair goes high enough, the keyboard tray may not be strictly necessary. Or if you work at a sit-stand desk, you can raise and lower, which some people swear by. Personally, I hate standing in place, so that's just out of the question for me. Next, number 2 is the narrow keyboard. A narrow keyboard is a keyboard that doesn't have the typical number pad and the other extra keys on the side, typically the right side. If you're an accountant or someone who does a lot of numerical data entry, this may not be practical for you, although there are separate detached number pads that you can get, which enables you to move it out of the way when not in use. What the absence of the number pad on a narrow keyboard enables you to do is bring your mouse in about 4 inches or so closer to center. Now, this is assuming you mouse right-handed. If you mouse left-handed, the absence of the number pad on the right won't matter, unless you have a left-handed keyboard, of course. Average-sized laptops also have a more compact keyboard, but you should never use the keyboard on a laptop except for brief periods when you're on the go. If you use a laptop as your main computer at home or your office, plug an external keyboard and mouse into it, and raise it up on something to bring the top of the screen to your eye level, whether it's just a stack of books or a special laptop holder stand, which means you're looking down slightly at the middle of the screen. You can never have the screen at the right height for your eyes and neck and the keyboard at the right height for your arms at the same time. With laptops, you end up either sacrificing your neck or your arms. Even if you already have an external monitor plugged into your laptop, I would still suggest getting a keyboard and mouse and putting them on a keyboard tray. Getting rid of my full-size keyboard and switching to a narrow one was by far the best ergo hack I ever made. Getting that mouse in several inches closer to center as a result allowed me to have my elbow several inches closer to my body, and oh, what a difference. My elbow, wrist, and shoulder have been happily thanking me ever since. And briefly revisiting the monitor height question, again, you want to adjust it so the top of the screen is at eye level, which puts the middle of the screen at a few degrees below eye level. And so you're looking down a little bit. And it's probably better to err on the side of having it a little lower rather than higher. Now, third and finally, let's talk about supports and contact points. Supports meaning those cushions in front of the keyboard and mouse that your wrists rest on, and armrests on chairs. Let's cover armrests first. The problem is that your arms are meant to hang from your shoulders, not be supported from below. Your hips and knees are weight-bearing joints meant to support you from below, but your shoulders and elbows are not. Resting your arms or even just your elbows on armrests is going to create unnecessary contact points. And the pressure from those contact points is going to tend to create restrictions in your tissues and interfere with your circulation. Yeah, this is a very slow, insidious process, of course, so I won't be surprised if you've never considered such a thing before. But have you ever taken off a pair of athletic tube socks or dress socks with a lot of elastic in them and noticed an indentation ring around your leg? The elastic in the socks creates a bit of a limp circulation restriction, causes a little bit of edema or swelling. What I'm talking about with armrest pressure spots is more subtle, but it's there. And I'm convinced that armrests are suspect in some cases of golfer's elbow and ulnar nerve pain, like cubital tunnel syndrome in office workers, which affects the under and inner side of the elbow, which contacts the armrest. I have a mixed opinion about keyboard and mouse rests. Ideally, we should type with our hands and fingers suspended over the keyboard with no contact points at the wrist, just our fingers. But we have to rest our hands somewhere when we're not actually typing, which will be on the keyboard wrist rest pad. I find that when I start typing, I lift my wrists off the pad and then rest them again when I pause. I remove the wrist pad that was in front of the mouse, however, and I recommend that you do the same. That's one of the great things about the keyboard tray I have, which is also shown in the accompanying article, in case you're not watching the video. You can remove either or both the mouse and keyboard wrist rests. When it comes to your mouse hand, the only contact you want is where it touches the mouse itself and the mouse pad under it. A standard thin mouse pad under the mouse is fine. It's always a good idea to have that little bit of cushion. But when you have a pad, a wrist rest in front of the mouse that you're resting your wrist on as you move the mouse, it's going to apply a constant pressure right on your carpal tunnel area and the tendons of your wrist and finger flexors just above it. And I'm certain that that can contribute to carpal tunnel syndrome. If you only have one mouse and keyboard rest pad that runs across the whole tray, I'm going to suggest removing it if you can to potentially save your mouse hand, wrist, and elbow. Perhaps you can cut the mouse part off and tape or glue the keyboard part of the pad back on if it's missing an essential connector that was on the mouse side, if you know what I mean. Okay, so those are my 3 big ergonomic suggestions. Get a keyboard tray, switch to a narrow keyboard, and avoid pads and supports, at least when it comes to armrests and supports for your mouse hand. Please check out the article that accompanies this video for the full 10 tips to healing mouse elbow, which also covers treatment if you already have computer wrist or mouse elbow. Because even though these 3 key ergonomic tips can be really effective and may help you prevent a case of computer-related wrist or elbow pain, they may not be enough to break the cycle once you have a full-blown chronic issue. If you're not already here at tenniselbowclassroom.com, that's where you'll find the article, and I'll put a link to it below or next to this video if I can. You'll also find my self-help programs for both tennis and golfer's elbow there, which may come in very handy if you already have a case of mouse elbow or computer wrist. But if you're not sure what you have or what you need at this point, check out my free intro video course, Tennis Elbow 101. I'll show you the basic tests for assessing whether you have tennis or golfer's elbow, and I'll give you an overview of these vexing conditions, including introducing you to a different and what I believe is a far better treatment strategy. And lastly, before you go, please subscribe and follow me for more. This is Alan Willett with the Tennis Elbow Classroom podcast. Let's break your vicious cycle.